Hello, welcome to the Women Fantasy Authors YouTube channel. I'm Janet Hinker, and I am talking today with Sheryl Hayes. And we met at Baycon over the 4th of July weekend, and I got a chance to talk with her and see her books and look at her dust jackets. And I knew I wanted to have a chat with her today about her work. So welcome, Sheryl.
Hi, it's
Yeah,
a
glad you could
pleasure to be here.
come.
Thank you.
And before we start talking about your writing work, I wanted to talk about your other talent, which is knitting and crocheting. And
Yeah.
it's not just knitting and crocheting as we normally think, but you actually do costumes. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, that actually started as an accident. A couple of years ago, I was out of work and it turned about I had a whole bunch of free time and needed a new hobby. And fortunately, buying yarn and learning how to knit and crochet were something I could afford to do while I was job hunting. And one day, this beautiful Wonder Woman sweater came across my dashboard, and I thought, I like that, but I don't like sweaters. I'm going to make that, but I'm going to make it as a tank top. And I thought, if I'm going to make a tank top, I'm a big Wonder Woman fan. I'm going to make the arm bracelets. If I'm making the arm bracelets, well, I'm making the crown. Before I knew it, I had this completely hand knitted
Yeah.
Wonder Woman costume.
Ah,
And a friend of mine said, hey, they have costume contests at those sci-fi cons you go to. Why don't you wear it there? I did. I won a whole bunch of awards not knowing what I was doing. I will admit that.
well, let
And
me,
thought that
yeah,
was a one-off.
that's incredible. I actually asked you for some photos. So let me share a screen so that people can see some of your work,
Yeah.
which
Now,
I
these
love
are
it.
actually the last 3 costumes I've done. That one-off costume turned into about 10 I've
Wow.
been doing. I am now considered what's called a master class costumer in the masquerade circuit. If you win certain awards, it's basically to keep things even so that somebody who's just starting out doesn't have to compete with somebody who has 10, 20, 30
Yeah.
years worth of experience. So, but
I
these are the last 3 I've done.
I just love them. And um I'm assuming that you are having to create the patterns and designs as you go. There's not going to be a pattern out there or
A lot of it is modifying existing patterns, like the one that was the babysitter, that is based loosely off of Mandalorian armor, but somebody made that helmet pattern and I just took it and ran with it in a slightly different direction. The Ewok one, I had somebody did make a pattern for the hood. I ended up designing the spear myself. The layup pattern, that was all well, um the green thing I'm wearing, which I cannot remember what it's called, that was a basic pattern I used and just did in that color and added a hood. The wig I'm wearing is actually a modified ski cap with braids of yarn added on so that it looks like braided hair.
right.
So
It's awesome. You are indeed multi-talented. So let's talk about your work, because I was able to get a book from you and have read Chaos Wolf, which is the first book in your series. And as I understand it, you've got 2.5 books out, the book 1 and 2, and then a short novella that comes between that and book 3.
book 3, yeah, and book 3 I'm
Okay.
currently working on. I'm hoping to have that out this time next year.
Yeah. Great. I was wondering, when did you first start getting interested in werewolves and vampires? Was it books, movies, films? When did that all start?
That's really started back in the late 90s, well, mid 90s, with the werewolf and vampire fiction boom. There was a lot of urban fantasy out there before it was called urban fantasy.
Right.
Writers like PNL Rod jumps to mind, Sherry Priest.
Right.
A lot of them got their start early 90s, and I can trace it actually back to specifically werewolves and vampires. I can trace back to 2 things. The X-Files, the 2 were
But
werewolf episodes that were on it, as well as the couple of vampire episodes they have. Then I ended up finding, while I was on lunch at a bookstore, a short anthology of werewolf stories. And I grabbed it thinking it was pure horror, but no, it was humor, it was horror, it was romance, it was a little bit of everything. I'm going, I could do something like this.
Well, you certainly have. You certainly, all of those
Mhm.
points you just mentioned, you hit in these books. So well, let's get a little bit more into the book itself. It's called Chaos Wolf, and I wasn't familiar with the term. Could you tell us exactly what a Chaos Wolf is?
Okay, well, I have to thank a friend of mine for that term. She was the one who came up with it. A
Okay,
chaos wolf is basically a werewolf without a pack. They sow dissension and chaos wherever they go until they are forced into joining a pack or somehow go away and leave the area. So
right. Okay,
that's
that's
that's the idea behind the term. It's lone wolf, but a little more.
makes sense. I wanted to read, let me just read your tagline off the book, because this is going to tell us right where we're jumping into the story. And it is bitten by a werewolf, taught by a vampire. At this rate, she's going to start a war. So
Mhm.
our main character, Jordan Abbey, starts right off at the front of the book, getting bitten by a werewolf. And then she is saved by a vampire who pulls her away before this wolf can carry her off. And so she ends up being friends with the vampires. And
Yeah.
she
Which is not done.
I was certainly not what I was expecting. And she becomes friends with Montgomery, who is the vampire that saved her. And then also Thorne comes into her life, who is a sometime roommate of Montgomery. He's there a lot of the time. And during this process, she becomes a famulus to Montgomery. Yes. And he is her patron. So could you tell me how that relationship works, what that's about?
Okay, people will real quickly realize I played a lot of Vampire the Masquerade and Werewolf the Apocalypse. And
Okay.
some of it's a takeoff of that. The idea between a famulus and their patron is not necessarily a vampire werewolf thing. It's a vampire servant who can go out in daylight thing. There are things that vampires will have to do to live in the modern world that they can't do just because the business is only open from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. when they can't be out in the sun. So they have these human, most of the time, servants referred to as famulus, or because I don't speak Latin, I went with the plural as family, which is actually a root where the famulus is the root word of family when you go back in Latin. So she, mostly to keep her safe and as an excuse to keep her with him, he has her designated as his basically personal servant and all-around errand girl.
Right. And it sounds like it's not exactly an equal relationship, but it's not, but I think those two characters do tend to, I think Montgomery treats her with a tremendous amount of respect, even from the very beginning. So it doesn't seem completely out of balance.
Later books, I'm going to go into the problematic nature of the power imbalance that is there. Something I've been aware of from the start, and I'm kind of playing into the, oh, wait a minute, what happens if she finally says no in a very public way?
Yeah.
And that's a problem.
Yeah.
That's coming.
Okay, well, that kind of leads me up to the next question, because the werewolves are not happy about this, because
No.
they want her in part of their pack. And I thought you did a really, really good job developing the two different clans, or the two different communities, and built the rules about werewolves versus vampires. Can you tell me a little about what was going on? What situation did Jordan land in between these two groups of people, and their sort of tentative truce that seems to be going on?
Well, at this point, it's mostly been up until recently. They are okay ignoring each other. We'll stick to the vampires will stick to the city, the werewolves will stick to the outskirts and the suburbs and the forest areas, and we'll be fine as long as we don't. We'll poke and hiss and snarl at each other every so often, but we'll mostly leave that alone.
Yeah.
Jordan changed that upset that balance, because the werewolves feel like, okay, she's one of us. She should be over here. And Montgomery's going, no, I don't want her over there. I want her with me. Not necessarily for his own. It's not that he has Jordan's best interests in heart. And this does come up later on in the book.
Yes.
There's history between this particular alpha and Montgomery, or Alpha Shane. So it's so there's personal conflict going on, and unfortunately Jordan is oblivious to a lot of it, and just doesn't have the information necessarily to make the smart decision. So she's just trying to do the best with what information she does have, and doesn't always make the smart decision, but doesn't know it's not the smart decision till later on.
Yes.
And then,
well, that brings me again to the next question I was going to ask you, or something I was going to comment on. This is about maybe midway, 2/3 of the way through the book. Jordan makes a decision to get involved with, I'm not going to say because that's a spoiler, and you have this
yes.
very spicy, very intimate scene. And when I got to that part of the book and I was watching Jordan going through her process, going, should I do this? Should I not do it? I was going, no, this is going to complicate things so much more. And she, of course, decides to go on and have this liaison, which we won't discuss in detail. But
Yeah.
I was just like, oh my gosh, this girl, she's strong. Like you said, she doesn't have all the information yet. And her mouth gets her in trouble sometimes. Tell us a little bit more about what her character, how you saw her overall as you were writing this.
She was, in some ways, me at that age, thinking I knew everything, from the perspective of 20 years of experience now. I knew nothing back then. So it was easy to tap into that. Okay, I've got this control. I got this. I got this. I got this. I don't got this.
Yeah.
And having to figure out how to handle this. I have a definite arc that I'm going to be taking her through in future books. If things go well, I have about 6 books plotted out that take her from where she starts to where I want her to end.
Okay.
So we're about, right now, the first 2 books in the short story, we're about 1/3 of the way through what I have in mind. And things are going to happen. And I'm trying very much to write these as standalone books, so that you don't have to have read book 1 to jump into book 2. I recommend you read book 1.
Yeah. I think,
I try to give enough information going on that if you pick up book 2 by accident, you're not going to be completely lost.
that's good. Although I would definitely recommend that people read book 1, because it really sets the tone and sets the groundwork and the scenes about what's going on, and shows where, I mean, she's really conflicted when I think in some ways, as more of it becomes clear to her, I think she even becomes more conflicted about what am I going to do with all of this? And
I know we're focusing on book 1, but when you go into book 2, she starts realizing, oh man, I messed up big time with some of the decisions I made in book 1. How am I going to get through this?
Yeah. Well, it's the whole concept is really interesting to think about. This young woman is going to college and she's walking to her car, and suddenly this thing happens to her, and she didn't even believe in werewolves or vampires. And all of a sudden she's thrust into this situation, and she has the vampires who are basically kind of being her support group and teaching her. And she doesn't really understand the scope of what's going on. She's struggling with, there's a shape-shifting component. It's not like it's not like she just changes on the full moon. There's a shape-shifting concept. You want to talk a little bit about that, how that works?
Okay. Basically, I'm putting it that shape shifting, for the most part, is an act of will. During the full moon, it's a lot less, a lot harder to keep it in control and
Mm,
not shift. And so, yeah, that's where you get the crazy werewolves that go out and attack everybody.
got it.
But the werewolves quickly realize, if we don't have our followers proving they can control themselves during non-full moon times, there's no way they're going to be able to control themselves during a full moon. And that plays into what is going on with Jordan and why the werewolf pack really gets, she makes says a couple things that really gets the alpha angry, and that's really where things start going downhill.
Yeah, yeah.
Or at
Well,
least she realizes they're going downhill. So
I am completely enamored with Jordan and Montgomery and oh gosh, Thorne. I'm sorry,
yeah.
Thorne, right? And this kind of dance that they're doing. They're really intriguing characters, and I
Mhm.
liked how you took her character throughout the story and show her being stronger and stepping more into her power. I that really came through
Mhm.
to me throughout the book, and I I just really enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to
Yeah.
seeing the rest of your stories.
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to make sure is that the women in my books have agency, not just the main characters, but all of the female characters. Whether they act on it or not, that's another thing entirely. But that was really, um, it was a struggle to write because I had a lot of people saying, well, she should be doing X, Y, and Z like in a traditional romance. I'm going, but I'm not writing a romance. Nothing against romance.
Yeah,
Let me
right.
be fair. That's not the story I'm writing. So I have to take her in my mind from a place of authenticity of what she would be doing and how somebody would be reacting if this were real, and not uh, tropes are not a bad thing. Do not get me wrong, but I just did not want to follow the trope of woman gets bit by a werewolf or by a vampire and becomes one and falls in love and has no
Yeah.
problems and is
Oh
able
no,
to be the bestest ever. And I'm going, no, that's
I'm
not what I want to do.
Cheryl, I'm glad you didn't, because I really liked, I mean, I was surprised about where the story went. And then afterwards, I'm like, oh, this is great. I love how you wrote it. I love how, again, I don't want to give spoilers, but it was a surprise. And I really liked how it complicated the story. And it's going to be interesting to see where the heart does finally land in this
It,
whole story.
to pull back the curtain just a little, that
Yeah.
whole scene surprised me also.
Did it?
I tried writing it 3, 4 different ways, and it just did not work until I hit on that. Well, what if? Oh,
Oh.
that makes sense. It does.
I thought it
And
did. Well, anyway, good job, and I hope that people agree when they get to that part of the
yeah,
story. You've already told us you've got 6 or 7 books already
I
mapped out.
have, I have, okay, I've written the first 2. I wrote it's actually a novelette. It's about 10,000 word short story. That's for the email list. Then I'm working on book 3, and I have plot ideas for 3 more books.
Great.
I'm not saying that they may not merge down to 5 or expand out to 7. I'll know a little more once I actually hit that portion of the stories, but we'll see
Okay,
where it
great.
goes. So
Well,
Jordan's not going away anytime soon.
glad. Let me share your information. You've given me so people can see your website and
Mhm.
how to.
Okay, my website is SherylRHayes.com, SherylRYLRHAYES.com. You can find links to all of my published novels. You can also find links to several short stories I have published. I am also proud to say my most recent work is a short story called The 10th Life, and that was featured on Cat's Cast, which is one of the Escape Artists Network podcasts. And that's links are all on the website. The short stories, I believe, no, 2 of the short stories are available as a bonus if you sign up for my email list. Cat's Cast is free to listen to, and they also have the text up of the story if you prefer to read it.
Great. And I will post your webpage link right below the recording, so people after they listen to the recording can find your link right there. So it'll be easy to find you. And
Okay.
sign up for her newsletter and you'll get the free story, and you can get a taste of her style of writing. I think you'll really enjoy it.
Mhm.
So I think we are about to come to a close. Do you have any, do you have ideas beyond Jordan's story, or are you pretty much?
Actually, I do have another vampire related story that is more, it's not related at all to the Jordan Abbey universe. It is a pastiche of Dracula, Carmilla, Lord Byron, and if you're really familiar with your Victorian age Penny Dreadfuls, Barney the Vampire. I've got it through my first draft. I'm working on editing that, and hopefully we'll have that up soon available.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I'm really glad that I ran into you at the con, and I've read the first book and I'm ready to jump into the second. It's really wonderful, Sheryl.
Thank you so much.
And
it was a pleasure meeting you.
Yeah. And I look forward to seeing you at future cons and possibly see your latest costume. I know you're going to be probably doing something for the future. So I look forward to that. So please, for those of you listening, give the like button some love. If you like the channel, please follow us so that you can see when new videos are posted. I'll be doing an interview probably about once a month. So thank you for joining us. And thank you again, Sheryl. It was really, really a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you for having me.